Welcome to the CFL 3-Down Breakdown for Week 5. I'm Ian Cameron for Sportsbook Review, expected to be joined momentarily by my co-host Andrew McInnis. He should be along in a few minutes' time. Looking forward to breaking down Week 5, especially coming off what was my best week, bar none, so far here in the CFL season. To this point, it was a fantastic Week 4 for me. Swept the board, 5-0, 6 units of profit for my official releases at Sports Memo in the CFL. It was a great week. I know on the show here we cashed a easy winner on the best bet with BC Hamilton flying over the total with ease on Saturday. So just a fantastic Week 4. Finally put the hammer down the week I was, the kind of week I was expecting, or I do expect on a weekly basis in the CFL. Finally had that in Week 4. Clean sweep of the board. It was nice to have that, but you can't do the Barry Horowitz forever. You got to move on, get ready for Week 5, and hopefully be able to duplicate those results. Looks like we got our pal Andrew with me, my co-host on the 3-Down Breakdown, ready to break down Week 5 action. Andrew, how are you today? He's muted, so that's a problem, but we'll get him on here in a second. Make sure he's got his mic going, but yeah, I mean, just a really good Week 4 result for me. No question about that. And looking forward to breaking down Week 5. And we've got a little bit. There we go. Andrew, can you hear me now? Are you good to go? All right. Well, in this case here, we'll move on. Week 5 starts Wednesday. Make sure you're aware of that this week here. Week 5 in the CFL starting is a really odd schedule this week. We've got situations where we've got a game on Wednesday, a game on Thursday, a game on Friday, a game on Saturday, and a game next Monday. It's a little bit of an odd schedule this week. And I got to do a little rant here about what the league's done to the Ottawa Red Blacks, because this is a disgrace. This shouldn't be allowed to happen. You should be fired. You should be looking for work if you're a schedule maker for the Canadian Football League right now, because this is an absolute joke what you've done to the Ottawa Red Blacks right here. They are playing 3 games in 11 days. When you think of last Friday in Edmonton, tomorrow night, Wednesday, hosting the Montreal Alouettes, and then next Monday they're in Toronto against the Argonauts. That's 3 games in 11 days. Not only do you do that to Ottawa, put them behind the 8 ball with 3 games in 11 days, they're traveling in between each game. They can't practice. Rick Campbell, the head coach, has voiced his frustration on radio interview earlier this week. His team can't practice for 2 full weeks from last Wednesday to next Wednesday. They are going 2 full weeks without one single practice. Not one practice. I can't believe how bad that schedule is. That's just not fair. That's totally asinine. That's totally ridiculous. It's a brutal schedule and a brutal hand that the league and their idiot, dopey schedule makers have given them. 3 games in 11 days, all with travel involved between games and not a single opportunity to practice for a full 2 weeks. That's as bad as it gets. If I'm the Ottawa Red Blacks, I have every right to be pissed. I'm 1,000% behind them in complaining about what the CFL has done in terms of the schedule for the Red Blacks over these next couple of weeks. You got to do better than that. I'm sorry. I don't care what the situation is. I don't care about what the TV schedule is. I don't care about what TSN, what schedule they need for television. I don't care what the situation is in terms of bookings at some of these stadiums for other events like concerts, whatever. You got to do a better job than that. You can't have a team play 3 games in 11 days with travel in between and no time to practice for a full 2 weeks. That's as bad as it gets. I feel terrible for the Ottawa Red Blacks. No team should be put through that kind of ridiculous joke of a schedule, but that's unfortunately what the Ottawa Red Blacks have been dealt. Andrew has ironed out his mic issues. I hear him breathing in the background, so it tells me he's ready to go. Andrew, how are you?
Good, Ian, good. I just want to say, just to add to your little rant there, Ian, I think it's just unacceptable. I don't think it should happen. People don't understand that in football, you shouldn't be made to play that many games in a short period of time. It's unacceptable. And not only that, but just like you mentioned, when I just hopped back on here, I could hear you mention, I believe you were talking about the practice time. If I'm not incorrect,
yeah, 2 weeks without practice for this team. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when you've got, I hate to say this still, but even Darian Durant, new coming in to the team, and everyone has to kind of settle in. This is a team that still has to try to establish themselves, and every team is trying to establish themselves. I understand maybe if it was even later in the year, but we're still early. I still consider us early here in CFL. We're still trying to understand every team We'll talk about that as the show goes on. And so I think, especially early on in the year, it's unacceptable. And whoever made this schedule, I really hope that they go out and everybody proves them wrong, and they put on a good performance, honestly.
Yes, that would be a good thing to see, no question. I know, but what's worse is that this is happening, basically in a time when the Ottawa Red Blacks are still looking for win number one, and now they're being dealt this really hellacious schedule where they're playing 3 games in 11 days. They got to travel in between each game, and now have no time to practice, get that rhythm, get that chemistry down. It's a tough spot, no question about that. How will the Ottawa Red Blacks handle it? We're going to try to answer that for you right now, because our first game in week 5 takes place Wednesday night, tomorrow night, a rare Wednesday night CFL game. It's going to be the Ottawa Red Blacks hosting the Montreal Alouettes, and we've seen some money come in on Ottawa. Ottawa opened a 3-point home favorite. It's up to 4.5 and 5 across the board right now, pretty much 5 for the most part. 50-50.5 is where the total is for this game. And I understand people looking at this as, kind of circle the wagons for Ottawa, and I was able to cash in with Ottawa plus the points last week against Edmonton. A nice little late touchdown getting us the money in that one. But the way I see it with this Ottawa Red Blacks team right now is I know the spot, desperation time. No question. It was desperation time last week, and it's even more so. And it's not like Ottawa is that far off from being a really good football team. They are still a talented football team, in my opinion. There's no denying that whatsoever. I think Trevor Harris has to be a little bit more consistent through 4 quarters. He's had, I think, more rough patches than I envisioned him having, but he's also had a lot of good moments. He's also been victim of some drop passes at times. So there's a lot of concerns there, but the defense really is the biggest issue that Ottawa's faced this year. I did say before the season started that could be where their growing pains are. Haven't exactly been overly sharp on the defensive side of the football. They did play better last week, though, against Edmonton. They bent, but they didn't break. They came up with some big red zone stops that allowed them really to stay in that football game. But just in general, they've been dealt a very tough schedule as well to begin the season. When you look at who Ottawa's had to play, 3 of the 4 teams, Western Division teams, Calgary twice, Edmonton, and a Toronto team that's proven to be not too bad, maybe a little bit further along in their development under Mark Trestman than anyone thought they would be in year 1 with the Argos at 2-2. So, Ottawa's had a pretty tough schedule in terms of opponents so far. There's no denying that, but 7th in total yards allowed, 7th in passing yards allowed, 7th in rushing yards allowed, 7th in points allowed. It's just not good enough on the defensive side of the football. Yes, there's been little bright moments here and there where it looks like this team is a good defensive team, but against the pass in particular, it's been a little bit of a rough go for them. And even running the football, a couple of big runs last week for Trayvon Van, the former Red Black, now playing for the Edmonton Eskimos and filling that running back spot for the injured John White, who of course out for the season for Edmonton. So Ottawa's got some improvement to do on the defensive side of the ball. I just don't know if I'm ready to lay the points with Ottawa here. We talk about an Ottawa team that's been in nothing but close games. This is not a lay points with kind of team right now. When you look at Ottawa's results, tie in week 1, lose by 4 to Calgary in week 2, lose by 1 in Toronto against Toronto, lose by 2 in Edmonton. Look at we've had a tie, a 4-point game, a 1-point game, and a 2-point game in Ottawa's 4 games this season. That's not the team I'm looking to lay points with here. So side perspective, I don't love it, but Montreal did show me something last week. Nice win for them at home against Calgary. The offense finally got rolling a bit with Darian Durant. There is potential for this offense. Jacques Chapdelaine's no dummy in terms of offensive play calling, offensive creativity. He's got a good CFL offensive mind. They've got some weapons. Taekwon Underwood stepped up, played well at receiver. BJ Cunningham has gotten the job done. There's some bright lights here in this Montreal receiving core. One thing that does concern me, though, for this game for Montreal, Tyrell Sutton out due to injury. That means Brandon Rutley is going to take over at the running back spot. And if you haven't seen Brandon Rutley before, there's a massive drop-off going from Tyrell Sutton to him at the running back spot. So concerns there at the running back position for Montreal. That being said, Montreal's got a little momentum. Montreal's been ultra competitive this season for the most part. You look at what Montreal's results have been so far this season, Andrew, and look, their game's been close too for the most part. Win against Saskatchewan, lose by 4 at Edmonton, lose by 7 against BC, and then of course they get the win against Calgary last week. So it's not I understand Ottawa's desperate, but desperate doesn't mean you can cover -5. And I'm leaning Montreal. I don't know if I'll pull the trigger, but at the current number, I kind of liked, I could have understood Ottawa -3, liking it then. Don't like them at -5.
Yeah, -5 is a little bit is pushing it quite a bit, Ian, I would say. And I would say I was saying this all week, and I've been saying this for the past 2 weeks. Honestly, especially early on in the season, you can't let a record really reflect how a team is going to be throughout the entire season. And I'm really happy you did that little breakdown about the games that Ottawa has had so far in this CFL season so far. I mean, Ottawa's a team I'm looking at. It's underachieving so far. Montreal, I'm not sure if I want to say that they're overachieving, but they're actually doing pretty well compared to what I thought they would have. They were going through quite the build the past couple of years. Didn't really know what to expect with them coming into the season. Didn't really know how Darian Durant would react. And then, of course, he had that week 1 win over his old team. So coming into this game, I don't really want to lay the points on either team because I'm just kind of waiting for that offensive explosion from Ottawa. And I'm sure you might be thinking the same thing. When is Ottawa really going to hit that point where it's the tipping point? And that's why the odds makers probably have it at -4.5 or 5. But what I really like in this game is the total. I think Montreal has started to put up points. They were being defensive as well, so I was kind of hesitant to take any totals with Montreal, but I think Ottawa is starting to pick things up. They're kind of getting the connections now. Trevor Harris is doing an outstanding job. I don't care if it might be an unpopular opinion, but I think he is only going to get better the more confidence that he is given and the more he settles into his own. Looking at it right now, I like the over in this game, so I'd look to lay the total at 50 or 49.5, whatever you can find would be my play on this game, Ian.
Yeah, the over. That's the good thing about that over the opinion of yours is, again, Montreal did finally get going offensively and against a pretty decent Calgary defense. Now, Calgary's defense has been weird because, they've really had one good defensive game. That was against Winnipeg. And then, of course, against Ottawa, they had a tough time. And then they had a tough time last week against Montreal. So Calgary defense has shown warts, but that's still good. When you can put 30 points up on the Calgary Stampeders, you're doing something right. So positive signs there, and you see a last year's meeting, particularly the meeting between these two teams here in Ottawa. There was only one meeting between them, and it was a 43-19 shootout. So definitely a chance to see this one get over the total. We'll see if it does on Wednesday. On Thursday, we've got Edmonton, Hamilton, and we've got the woe-begotten Hamilton Ticats who just can't get out of their own way right now. Edmonton, a 3-point road favorite, total of 54.5. Really, what's there to like with Hamilton right now? Not a lot, but we did see, at least a semblance of offense this week, which was a big problem for them in their first 2 games of the season. They had terrible time protecting for Zach Collaros, terrible time blocking up front and opening up any sort of holes for any ground attack. Finally, Ross Scheuerman got going last week at running back a little bit for this Hamilton team. They were able to run the football a little bit. Still a little surprised he has displaced CJ Gable, but I think Ross Scheuerman's definitely shown he can. He's deserving of that spot. He's run the ball hard. He's run the ball well, and certainly more effective than Gable. So not the worst choice in the world. Again, Zach Collaros finally got going. There were moments where the offense stalled still, but hey, they still put up points. They, 24 points last week against the BC Lions. That's still 26 points rather. That's still an improvement for sure on what they did in the first 2 games against Saskatchewan and Toronto. There's no question about that. But this defense remains a sieve. They can't stop a little caterpillar right now. They can't stop a nosebleed. You can, whatever little phrase you want to use. That's this Hamilton Ticats defense right now in a nutshell. I have not seen a secondary this inept in quite some time, whether it's been CFL, NFL, or college. They just don't play the ball. They don't play the man. They basically come up. They basically are defending hot air right now, these Hamilton cornerbacks, and they're basically not getting a hold of anything. I mean, they're not knocking the ball down. They're letting the receiver blow by them in coverage. When they're one-on-one battles for the football in the air at the highest point, guess who's winning those battles? It ain't the Hamilton DBs right now. It's the receivers on the opposing teams. It's happening every single time when there is a 50-50 football up for grabs, receiver or Hamilton DB. Who is winning that battle? I'd say 100% of the time this season it's been the receiver. I mean, they're just poor secondary play. I didn't like Jeff Reinbold being the DC from the beginning, promoted DC. He was DC once in his career. Earlier with the Alouettes, gave up 30 points or more 4 times that season, 40 points or more another 2 times when he was a Alouette defensive coordinator in 2012. That was Jeff Reinbold's one previous season as a DC. It didn't work out well. It's not working out well here. And from what I've heard from Ken Austin, they're not getting any of these injured parts back in the secondary. They were hoping one or both of Abdul Kanay and Emmanuel Davis would be back next week. or last week against BC. They weren't, and now there's talk they may not be back for Thursday against Edmonton. And if that's the case, I want no part of Hamilton. Not at this price. I would have to look Edmonton -3 in this game. And I know it's a short week for Hamilton, but without travel. But Ken Austin said it. We've got a lot of things we got to clean up. We got to make roster changes. There's going to be new players and new positions quite possibly for Thursday, so a lack of continuity on a short week. It's not exactly the situation I'm looking to endorse a team in, that's for sure.
Sounds to me like a pretty passionate Hamilton fan over there, Ian.
Passionate and a little pissed off at the same time. But you know what? We've had some good years with this football team. They were to 2 Grey Cups in back-to-back years, going through a little bit of a tough time, a bad time right now, a tough spot, tough situation. Got injuries, especially in the place they can't afford them. In the secondary has really hurt them, but we'll see. But I think things might get a little worse for Hamilton before they get better.
Well, here's what I'll have to say about the Hamilton Tiger Cats. One thing just to add on to your little rant there is if you're going to be a team that has as shitty of a defense that Hamilton does, you have to be able to put up points. And if you have that bad of an O-line, where, in my opinion, Zach Collaros is a pretty good QB, and I think you think that too. I think he is up to the task. He is every week trying his best to get out, escape, and he's just not able to scramble enough because the O-line isn't doing anything for him and not really helping him one bit, just trying to make a decision, get a pass off, and you know, make the smart decision. And that's what's hurting them the most is that, you know, they get one stop on defense, the ball goes back on the Hamilton side, and they can't even establish any offense. They can't march down the field simply because he has no protection. And, you know, if you're a QB and you can't rely on at least for 1 or 2 downs to at least have a little protection to try and make up your mind, get a good pass, throw a deep bomb for once, you know, it's tough. It's tough. And, you know, I was talking to Ian, and you've told me, like, you've been at games. You've been there front and center to see them play, and it's tough to watch. And I think as far as defensive-wise, they're a little bit laid back. It's almost like they don't want to be too aggressive. So the fact that they're laid back, they're almost letting the opposing wide receivers catch the ball. And after that, it's just kind of game over because they can't seem to tackle anything at all. But just to touch on Edmonton right now, a lot of talk about them right now, and people are saying, you know, is this team a team to take seriously? Is this one of the best teams in the CFL right now? I'm not sure if we're supposed to be talking about fantasy on here or DraftKings, Ian, but look for Mike Riley for your QB this week against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I think that he'll have a extraordinary week. He's just having fun out there. He's doing a great job. He's got the targets, but not just that, but his decision making. He seems like I said, the opposite of Hamilton. He's comfortable back there. He's a veteran. He has the O-line to make him secure, to make the smart pass. And this is one of the reasons why I like Edmonton this week.
Yeah, and you know, we're going to see if Hamilton's defense is improved with Will Hill returning from his 1-game suspension. Remember, he had the incident against Saskatchewan. He'll be back. That's certainly going to help. Can't hurt at this point, but still, a lot of issues here with this Hamilton defense. And, you know, the short week, even though they stay home for another home game, we'll see. But, you know, right now you got to trust. If you're going to bet Hamilton +3 in this game, you basically are trusting them to win the game. And that's a situation I'm not ready to trust them in just yet. The offense was better last week. I will say that. That's at least one thing that Hamilton's got going into this game on Thursday. Winnipeg, BC, Friday. Interesting game, and what an interesting line move here. Winnipeg, 8.5-point road favorite road underdog rather, when this thing opened. It's been bet all the way down to 4.5. We've seen a 4-point move here on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I actually bet Winnipeg +8.5 for a little bit because I thought spot-wise it was a little bit of a good one for them. Spot-wise, not so good for BC off 3 straight road games in the East. Won them all. They're a little flat, a little fat and happy. That's certainly a concern for as much as I like this BC team. And, of course, the injury to John Jennings at quarterback. He will not play in this game. He got injured early against Hamilton on Saturday. And that's another thing, too, about that Ticats defense. Travis Lulay, cold off the bench, rips them for over 400 passing yards. Shows you how bad it is right now for Hamilton. But give Lulay credit. Lulay can play still. He can. You know, I don't know if he has that game-to-game to be able to start multiple games in a row and do it well like he did against Hamilton, and certainly be facing at least a little bit of a better defense here with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. But give him credit. He was very good. Showed enough athleticism still, even though he's a little bit older. He was always known to be a mobile quarterback earlier when he was a starter years ago at BC, but he still showed that to a good extent against Hamilton. And he played well. He found Burnham. He found Arsenault, Iannuzzi, all these targets at receiver here. Nick Moore, what a huge game for Nick Moore for BC at receiver. He spread the ball around. Impressive performance for Travis Lulay. But now you've got the game under your belt. Now you know you're the starting quarterback, at least for this week against Winnipeg. I've seen this before. Come in cold off the bench, you play great. Then you're the starter the next week because the starting quarterback, the number one guy, is still not ready to come back. And that next game, you flop a little bit and you just don't play as well. I've seen it before. Can Lulay avoid that? We'll see. But, you know, I kind of like taking Winnipeg plus 8.5. They got a bounce back win against Toronto last week after a real bad loss to Calgary. And, you know, the road underdog role for Winnipeg was pretty good last year. I think they were pretty good point spread wise against that role. But again, I kind of like them at 8.5. Now it's 4.5. I mean, you talk about value that's gone down the tubes pretty much. That's what we see with this current line right now.
Yeah, it's been pretty surprising for me this year, especially how drastically the lines have been changing every single minute, every single hour, every single day. As far as Winnipeg goes, I've actually really liked them this year. I think they've been doing a good job putting up points. I mean, I've always been a fan of Dressler, and I think Matt Nichols is doing an excellent job having a connection with him. One of the favorite targets for him. I could see that. You know, coming into this game, just like you said, you're comfortable with that plus 8.5. You look at that, you wake up in the morning, big smile on your face. You say, "Is this Christmas?" I mean, I'll take that with a smile on my face. But now it drops down to this minus 4.5, and you know, you're kind of a little bit more iffy about it. Travis Lulay, though, coming into he surprised me how well he played coming into last week after Jonathan Jennings went down injured, like you said. And you know, I just don't think that he'll be able to follow that up. You mentioned that you've seen it before. I strictly do not think that he'll be able to instantly come in after a short week of practice and just have that connection, have that chemistry. I mean, he came in the middle of a game. He did his job. He made smart plays, put up some points for his team. I mean, there's no questioning it, Ian. He put up points for his team and looked like the old QB he used to be. But I just don't think this young, athletic Winnipeg Blue Bombers team is going to struggle against the BC Lions. I mean, this is going to be a big defensive test, in my opinion, for this BC Lions team.
Yeah, it will. I mean, BC's offense has been going in fits and starts so far. We'll see if they can put it together against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on Friday night. Saturday night, Saskatchewan, Calgary. We've got Calgary, a 9.5, 10-point home favorite pretty much across the board in this one. Total sitting at 57.5, 58. We're tight for time, so I'm going to save my analysis on this game for best bet because this is where my best bet's going to come from. Andrew, what's your take? Rider, Stamps, Saturday night.
Looking at this line right now, Calgary coming off that loss, first loss, or really a tough loss for them on the season. Bo Levi Mitchell has been my favorite QB all season, but I haven't really liked and been comfortable taking any huge spreads this year so far in the CFL. I think most games have been close. There's been some blowouts. There's been some big games, but I like the Riders, the way they've come into their own. I like the way they play defense. Kevin Glenn, he's actually stepping up. He seems like he has a connection with every wide receiver. You could throw you and I in there, and he would probably get us one catch. I mean, it might be an over-exaggeration, but I mean, the way that he plays, I'm comfortable laying those points. But, you know, thinking about it at the same time, Bo Levi Mitchell and coming off that loss, I think he's going to be pissed off. You know, typically, if I saw a plus 10 against anybody else, you know, I'd be comfortable laying those points. But right now, if I were to have a lean, I would probably go Calgary, actually, just because of how pissed off I think Calgary's going to be. If there's a team in the CFL that can bounce back, it is the Calgary Stampeders. But again, I mean, if you're looking to take Calgary on that huge spread, might even look for a team total play for Saskatchewan or for Calgary. Get a couple side bets going, or even take the over, because I think if Calgary covers that huge spread or can hit that huge spread, it'll probably be obviously a high-scoring game as well, because I know that Saskatchewan is not going to get completely blown out. They'll be able to put some points up on the board, Ian.
All right, Ottawa-Toronto, Monday night. And, of course, I'll get back to that game for best bet. Ottawa-Toronto, Monday night, July 24th. I'm going to keep it brief because, again, we've got Ottawa. Didn't we just talk about Ottawa? Oh, yeah, they're playing twice in 5 days. Ridiculous. Ottawa-Toronto, 2-point home favorite, 54 the total. Really, I want to see what Ottawa does Wednesday night. And a lot of my analysis, you know, injuries, we don't know what's going to happen there. What if someone gets hurt Wednesday night? So not much to go with on this game yet. We might run into this situation a couple of times where we've got a team twice on our breakdown playing 2 games in less than a week. That might happen again. I think it will happen again another couple of times this season. So it's tough to gauge the Ottawa-Toronto game before the Ottawa-Montreal game has even been played. But, the Argos are one of those teams where it's been good one week, bad the next week. I mean, that's really what we've seen from this Toronto Argonauts team. Good against Hamilton, bad against BC, good against Ottawa in that comeback win. Pretty good, actually, at times last week against Winnipeg. But again, the fourth quarter, and Toronto was in a tough spot. Second road game in less than a week. They gassed out. They got tired late. Winnipeg pulled away and ended up winning that game. If you follow the pattern, this should be good Toronto showing up here, maybe victorious Toronto in this game. And given the situation for Ottawa, my initial lean is toward the Argos here, but we're going to watch Wednesday's game first, see what happens.
Yeah, I really am not a fan of the Argonauts' inconsistency right now. It's tough to read. You never know what kind of team you're going to get thrown on that field out of them. And like you mentioned, it's kind of hard to read this Ottawa team playing 2 games in 6 days. It's hard to cap this right now, hard to look at it, hard to describe what's going to happen in this game before watching the Wednesday night game. But having said that, I've been talking about how I believe that Ottawa is an underachieving team so far, Ian. They have not put up the numbers. They have not had good stops. Trevor Harris has not reached his peak that I know he will reach even by the midway of this season. And in my opinion, coming into this game against the Argos is a big game for them. I think this will be the game that the Ottawa Red Blacks come into their own and kind of step up and shine. I'm telling you guys right now, the Ottawa Red Blacks are not going to be a crap team this year. They're not going to be, bottom of the league, a team that's just terrible to watch. They're still an exciting team. We can't forget that first week 1 game against the Calgary Stampeders that ended in a tie. What a bang to open up this CFL season. So I'm leaning towards Ottawa in that game. But like I said, we'll watch and see what happens here. But Ottawa is my early lean. I think that's the game that they come out and prove to everybody that they're not just some bum team that's going to be crappy all season, especially against this inconsistent Toronto Argonauts.
And they're actually plus 39 yard differential in their 4 games, Ottawa, despite being winless. So that tells you, they're just some mistakes, just not making the right play at the right time, a lot of close losses. So, yeah, this team is better than their record. The question is, when do they get that first win? Will it be tomorrow? Will it be Monday? Or are we still going to be talking about a winless Ottawa team somehow next week? We'll have to wait and see. But let's go to best bets as the show wraps up. Andrew, I'll start with you. What's your best bet for week 5?
Best bet for week 5, I'm just going to go with the Edmonton Eskimos at -3 over your Hamilton Tiger Cats. I just think this is a struggling team. It may seem like an obvious pick, but I think it has to be made. And I would get on that before it starts to get higher and higher, because I believe everyone, the public, everybody else going to be pounding the Edmonton Eskimos. And, it could be a game where the Hamilton Tiger Cats settle into their own, but I just think that they are not quite there yet. They're not on the level of the Edmonton Eskimos. There are 2 teams going in different directions. Sure, the Hamilton Tiger Cats are starting to, find themselves a little bit, but defensive-wise, they are not going to be able to contain Mike Riley and his offense and the amount of points they're going to put up, especially even maybe look for a team total play on the Edmonton Eskimos as well. But best bet for myself for this week, Edmonton Eskimos -3.
All right, I'm going to Saskatchewan, Calgary. One team is 12-0 straight up, 10-2 against the spread off a loss since 2013. You know what team that is? That's the Calgary Stampeders. And yes, laying points of this magnitude is not something I like doing often, but damn it, I'm going to do it in this spot. I'm going to look to Calgary -9.5. And this was a tough, actually, I'm going to give you -9 because I see a -9 at the Greek right now. We're going to go with that. Calgary -9. That's rotation number 358 against Saskatchewan. Look, Kevin Glenn's played good. There's no question for throughout the early part of the season, especially the last couple weeks. Hamilton and the game against Winnipeg, even that they lost, he played well. But this is a much tougher, taller order for Kevin Glenn. Now you got to do it as well on the road against a Calgary team that off a loss. They have been phenomenal. They have just been one of those teams. I think they've won the majority of their games in that 12-0 straight up, 10-2 against the spread off a loss run for Calgary since 2013. Majority of those wins have come by double digits. I went back and looked. I think they can get this one by double digits. Calgary -9. Best bet for CFL Week 5. All right, that is going to wrap up the show for this week, Andrew. We're right out of time. Big Man and Donnie coming up with the right side of campus. We'll be back next Tuesday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, to look at CFL Week 6. Until then, enjoy Week 5 in the Canadian Football League, and good luck.